you, the audience, so that you can understand the evolution of technologies and how you can take the insights to apply it to your own growth paths, to rethink technologies and drive first mover advantage. Today we're going to be talking about big data and analytics, and the term big data is overhyped, and often the term analytics is underserved because many people, when they use the term analytics, really think about reporting. And what I want to do today is have you rethink both of these terms. I think big data, because it's overhyped, it loses meaning, and analytics, because it's often associated with reporting, loses meaning. But I think the concepts and the current phase that we're in terms of technology development is one of the most exciting that I've seen in my 14 years as an industry analyst. So let me introduce myself. I'm your moderator today. I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights. I've been an analyst with Gartner, AMR Research, Altimeter Group. I started in industry, managing factories and distribution centers. I have actually worked in the development of software with companies Magistics and Descartes. And I love technology, and I love writing about technology, and I have a blog called The Supply Chain Shaman that many of you may have seen. It's read by about 5,000 people around the world. And what I do as a format is I do quantitative data, and then I ask people that are experts to join me to really share the insights about whatever the topic is. And today for Big Data and Analytics, I invited this panel for specific reasons. Sean Riley's been doing a lot of work on Internet of Things, and as we think about Big Data and Analytics, we have systems that will not only think, but they'll also be able to drive input. So Sean, introduce yourself to the group and talk briefly about the work you're doing on Internet of Things.
Hi, my name is Sean Riley. I'm the Global Director of Manufacturing, Supply Chain, and Logistics Solutions for Software AG. And we've been really focusing on the Internet of Things from a fast-moving data concept. How can we focus on ingesting massive amounts of data and analyzing it at speed to do some of the interesting things that Laura stated previously, such as understand asset positioning, understand arrivals, understand production yields, production quality, to provide a much more granular level of visibility than could previously be obtained.
Right. And so one of the issues is that, we've thought about data as columns from ERP, and we've thought about data as rows from APS, but as we think about streaming data and we think about data pools, we need to think about how we drive discovery. Now, I first met Steve DeAngelis 5 years ago, and Steve has been doing some phenomenal work on cognitive learning. Steve, give the group a little bit of your background and what you've been doing around cognitive learning and what that means.
Sure. I'm the founder of and president of Intera. We are a cognitive computing firm. And what that means is we're a firm where artificial intelligence meets advanced mathematics to solve some of the large problems that are facing supply chain companies today. We enter into an area where we use a technology that allows you to span across very complex data sets and understand how to solve problems where there are multiple variables and multiple complicating factors, such as supply chain optimization, digital path to purchase, where we have advanced personalization services like Flavor Print that we built with McCormick & Company. So our company is aimed at solving some of those very complicated problems where you have a lot of variables, a lot of data, and statistics has been an inadequate tool so far to address those challenges.
So one of the beauties, I think, of cognitive learning, Steve, is the fact that we can have multiple ifs to multiple thens, whereas our traditional systems have been single ifs to single thens and not really with a lot of intelligence. So I think that just raises the bar of what we can do with systems, which is so exciting. Would you agree?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that big data has done is it has given firms a rich palette of information to draw analysis from. The challenge has been that you've had to have a lot of human data scientists organized to ingest data, process it, and then generate an insight manually. In today's world, speed and velocity is critical to making the decisions where there are those multiple lifts to multiple vents, and what is the optimal solution to that problem that that has those multiple lifts and multiple vents. And that's the area that we find really exciting in the marketplace, because big data has provided the high octane fuel to enable the types of next generation analyses that we do today.
Okay, let's shift now to Esther. Esther, you're dialing in today from Europe, and you've been doing a lot of great work on artificial intelligence. Can you briefly introduce yourself and talk about what artificial intelligence means to you?
Yes, sure. I am the CEO of Rulex, which is a provider of machine learning-based prescriptive analytics software tools. So basically, Rulex is an artificial intelligence platform to address advanced analytics and prescriptive analytics, adaptive modeling, and many other big data challenges. So our main focus is to domain experts without a data science background. So I recall the keywords that I have already heard today, so velocity and automation and rule-based machine learning, which are the key of what we are doing today in artificial intelligence.
You know, and Esther, a lot of times I'll talk to people that are on the ground in supply chain, and I'll talk to them about artificial intelligence, and they'll say, wow, that's way off in the future. What do you think? Is it relevant now? Where are we on the evolution of the artificial intelligence?
I think artificial intelligence, which is pretty a generic term, but in general, can be very useful even today, already today, for business field like a supply chain, for example. So it's not just for the future, it's already happening. For example, Danone, the yogurt firm, implemented a Rulex-driven dashboard to understand demand dynamics, which enabled them to create promotions with the highest ROI. And only after they had this cognitive learning engine that enabled them to clearly see the rules driving their customers' demand behavior, they were able to optimize their promotion spend. So a firm like Danone has been doing these advanced processes already for years. So I think it's absolutely the present, and in the future, of course, this trend will expand, but we are already doing that.
Okay, thank you, Esther. Now let's introduce Dave Schumann. So Dave is one of my favorites from my experience in consumer packaged goods, and Dave now works for Cloudera that is working on the building of non-relational technologies. So if you think about traditional supply chain technologies, they're all about structured data, and we stuff the data into relational databases. And Dave's doing a lot of work on non-relational. So Dave, give a little bit about your background and why you think non-relational technologies is important to this discussion.
Sure, Laura. So I'm at Cloudera, I'm what's called a subject matter expert, or a SME. But it's also a lot of big data evangelism about how our consumer packaged goods companies and retailers can use this type of a platform. So Cloudera is an enterprise data management company. We created an open platform we call an enterprise data hub, this thing, the EDH. And it's powered by Apache Hadoop, which is an open source software framework that enables fast and efficient data storage, processing, and analysis on industry standard hardware. So you think of it kind of like a data warehouse. It's like you load data into it, you prepare that data for analysis, you query that data through standard BI tools like Tableau or Business Objects or others, and you can create models on that data using industry standard tools like SAS, R, and other things. So what this means to supply chain professionals is that you can bring any data to an enterprise data hub. any size, any native form, at any velocity, and be able to make use of that data to drive your business process. So batch or streaming, highly structured or differently structured. I try to avoid the use of the word unstructured. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But the EDH really allows you to make use of any and all of your data.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to share some data, and then I'm going to ask for some panel perspective. So when we look at today's supply chain, and this is some research that we've done to really say, how are we doing? And you can see that most companies believe that there's great room for improvement in what they have today, that it's cautious, it's reactive, it's traditional, it's inside out. And when we think about, the current state, what we've done is we've only used structured data. And I agree with Dave in terms of his definition of unstructured, but let me just spend a little bit of time here. Structured data is data like order or shipment data or on-hand inventory. It's data that I can put in rows and columns, very structured. Unstructured data are things like documents, pictures, maps, images, weather data. And we've struggled to be able to use data with different structures, and a large part of being able to look at new forms of analytics and the value proposition is to be able to basically merge data that is both structured and of different forms. In fact, when people talk to me about big data, which is around velocity, variety, and also size, one of the things that excites me the most is the ability to use different data forms. Now, our original supply chains, which we are on the first two evolutions of APS, Advanced Planning, were single ifs to single thens. If you think about available to promise, or you think about rules for order management, or you think about master data management, we basically would hard code single ifs to single thens. But supply chains don't play by the rules. They need to be very adaptive. We need multiple ifs to multiple thens through our workflows, through our management, and that's why I'm very excited about artificial intelligence and cognitive learning. Now, the other thing is we have built very prescriptive engines that look for known functions or mathematical outcomes. We have not built organizations for discovery, and we really haven't been able to deploy to the level that I think drives value, concurrent optimization, which allows us to look across source, make, and deliver together, and to look at choices and to combine new forms of math with artificial intelligence and rules-based ontologies to drive new insights, which I think is really exciting. Our deployments have been primarily within the organization, and what we're starting to do is to really evolve the cloud. And in fact, our year-over-year tracking studies show that supply chain leaders actually prefer cloud-based deployment, and right now that is allowing us to look at inter-enterprise flows and flows even within the organization, because we find that the average organization has 7 to 9 ERP systems, and in fact we work with companies that have 30 to 60. The other thing is our current systems are inside out. They don't allow us to synchronize and harmonize channel data or supplier data. And as we look at this, the opportunity to reduce the bullwhip effect and reduce volatility really lies in building value networks. And it isn't about, just the automation of the enterprise, but it really looks at how do we build value networks. Our current process flows have been very inside out. If you think about the Apex work or the SCORE work, it's been very much about catching orders and catching shipments and really managing order to cash and procure to pay. When we're talking about outside in and we're sensing off of channel data and we're sensing off distributor data and we're sensing suppliers and we're sensing in transit, we're actually able to sense before we respond versus traditional supply chains that responded often in a rote response. It allows us to think about non-relational structures to mine and get answers for questions that we don't know with our lake streams and clouds. So if you think about, data lakes or data pools, whether it's channel data or whether it's market data or whether it's quality data, or streams, the Internet of Things, or clouds, the ability to connect multiple parties, it allows us to look at how can we do this through different architectures. The other thing is, our traditional visualization were rows, columns, and graphs. And one of the things that I think is just really exciting is the simulation digital outcomes, to be able to really work on 3D representation or simulation. Because the traditional optimization gave us average results, and we couldn't really test feasibilities. So, Sean, what excites you the most on this chart? If you had to step back and say, supply chain leaders, let's think about this differently. What excites you the most?
So what really excites me the most is what you talked about when you're looking at the outside-in approach. Being able to take movement data that's being supplied by a variety of sources and bring that data against what I call contextual data or slow-moving data that will come from your traditional applications. But when you're able to do that, that will help ensure that participants or users of that particular tool or conglomeration of tools will be able to make better, more informed decisions based on what their objectives are of that time, what their long-term objectives are, and what resources are available to them. So they're continually optimizing the cost-value equation in real time from an exception management perspective. To me, that's the most exciting portion of this particular chart.
And when you think about Internet of Things, where do you see the earliest deployments?
The earliest deployments I see will really be on asset tracking at a very high level, so i.e., IoT data that's coming from a variety of sources that are already available, such as container ships, air freight, over-the-road freight. At a discrete level, it will be added down to the product level so you can understand things like vibration analysis, temperature, anything that might impact the handling and management of a product throughout the supply chain. But to start off with, we're going to see the adoption and usage of data that's available right now and becoming ever more readily available as more and more sensors get added to existing assets in the supply chain.
Yeah, so I think about cold chains when you talk about that, and fresh produce. We're still throwing away about 2 out of every 6 chickens, and 56% of the food stuff in Africa, is spoiled, and, our cold chains aren't very effective for drugs. So that's what I think about. Is that consistent, Sean?
Absolutely, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, where they have some very tight service level agreements on how their inbound raw material gets handled, specifically to your point from a temperature perspective, but also from a wait time and movement perspective. The ability to understand that in real time, then of course be able to recall that from a track and trace perspective will be invaluable to that specific industry.
And I think the connection of Internet of Things to cognitive learning, if I think about cold chains and directed put away and the ability to look at, temperature abuse and how I put it away to cognitive learning, I see connection to other things. Let me shift to Steve. Steve, if you look at this chart, what excites you the most here?
Well, the column, the rows of rules and engines, and the combination of those. One of the things that I think is most disruptive right now is the ability to do concurrent optimization across the supply chain. Historically, we've been constrained in being able to understand the butterfly effect through different planning processes by the ability of statistics to allow us to generate an analysis that would be constrained by, say, 8 or 10 variables. But like you mentioned earlier, as we look at a supply chain now as integrated from sourcing to manufacturing to distribution, if we can harmonize that supply chain and we can understand how that butterfly effect works, if we have an optimization that goes on in the supply network, how does that affect our manufacturing schedules and things like that? that the ability to manage that now at a next level of efficiency, I believe, is going to drive dramatic cost reductions and allow for us to deliver the products that we want to the consumers at the time they want it in the most effective way.
Yeah, and, you know, unfortunately, we kind of have this traditional ERP and APS kind of mindset, and we forget that what we think are constants are really variables. So, for example, you know, planning lead times are really variable. They're not constant, or what's happening in transit. So I think it's important as we think about that, Steve, that we're open-minded and not constrained by today's technologies. And I often find when I talk about these concepts, most people have a hard time struggling for the difference. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I mean, to understand the application of disruptive mathematics or the application of reasoning systems on data hasn't been everybody's experience to date. So the way we try to solve that problem is by building very discrete applications at clients where we're showing, here's how this new system of cognitive computing works. Here's how a machine can reason about data. Here's how we can calculate in a non-statistical way about data so we can generate an insight at a machine level that would allow you to do the type of optimization that you just described, Laura, or allow us to ingest sentiment information about a customer's preference and recommend to them a product at the critical point of the decision that the client is making a choice to purchase a product through a purchase medium in an omni-channel retail world. So, you know, being able to build those discrete examples and use cases has been a very good tool in getting CPG managers to understand and to understand how to use that application within their business unit.
Now, Esther, I find that a lot of people come to the table with, you know, more of a statistical, industrial engineer kind of background of looking at, you know, math in terms of statistics and fixed functions and outcomes. When you look at this chart, you know, what excites you and what would be your recommendation for the audience?
Oh, well, I'm very excited from the ability to dominate the complexity, in particular in supply chain, through the use of automatic rules, so adaptive rules, multiple ifs to multiple thens that are inferred automatically from data. I think this is the key for analytics, artificial intelligence, and cognitive learning to be very useful in the field of supply chain, because everything has to go through a high level of automation and real-time business application. So I would really say that I think that for analytics to really grow in popularity and usage, in particular in supply chain, they will need to become not people-driven, so not based on few very smart guys, but really data-driven, so natively automatic, quick, and scalable. And we have seen this process over and over in computer hardware, software, and internet technologies already. So I think user-accessible solutions are already today the key to mainstream adoption and growth of these advanced analytics and artificial intelligence technologies. And so this is also, of course, why we have focused so much in this area already. So automation through rules.
Okay. And, you know, if I think about automation through rules, you know, we've gone through 2 evolutions of systems, and we still have distrust of black boxes, and, you know, we've got Excel spreadsheets that have formed Excel ghettos right through our organizations, which don't allow us to have system of record. Dave, when you look at this chart, what excites you? If you were listening, what would be of value for you as a supply chain leader?
Well, Laura, when I look at this, I see the power of and. And it's all over this. It's mashing up 2 or more different types of data sources together. It's applying different types of processing frameworks against the data, like SQL, the lingua franca of business analytics. But you can also put search and machine learning to identify patterns and events on that exact same data. And so as I see this evolving technology around here, what you really start to see is this open discourse and collaboration, open formats, open frameworks, and importantly, open source economics that allows you to do this kind of distributed computing or multiple frameworks on that data. But along with that, you're still continuing the familiar. So these multiple frameworks that can operate against that data, industry standards like BI and search, allow you to transfer that existing domain knowledge with impunity. You're not throwing out the hard-won knowledge of your people just because of some shiny object technology. You're actually layering that on top of what you have today, and you're really starting to move the ball forward.
Well, and I want the panel to think as we go through the data, because we have never thought about clouds, right, and what clouds can do for the extended enterprise. And we really haven't thought about streams like Internet of Things and streaming data. And we really haven't thought about data pools as we think about, discovery and answering the questions we don't know to ask, like we can see in channel data. What I want to do now is share some research that we've gotten from some recent data we've collected from the field of supply chain leaders, and I want to talk about the barriers and opportunities for us to more holistically embrace these concepts. So this is a study that we will publish next week. It's based upon 179 respondents. It's interesting that only 33 of the respondents actually have a big data initiative. And in fact, when I talk to people about concepts like rules-based ontologies, Hadoop, they go, whoa, Beowulf clusters, what does all this mean? So it really requires the reskilling for a new language, and it needs to be a deliberate initiative. I find that we've been on a forced march on forced maintenance, and in fact, many of our information technology budgets are so saddled with maintenance costs for legacy software of ERP and APS that people find it difficult to get funding for these new initiatives, which is a barrier. And the other thing is it requires new thinking, and one of the issues is how do we really reskill employees so that they can think about these new terms and define new processes? And I get a lot of questions around how do I build digital processes? How do I build, analytics areas? And so one of the things we're going to come back to the panel and ask is how do we build this next evolution of knowledge workers? If we look at the top 3 levels of business pain for the respondents, you can see the ability to access and use data ranks up there in the top 5. But even more important is talent. As we think about talent, many of our supply chain leaders are coming through supply chain schools of business, and we find that there's a gap in scientific, technology, and engineering and math skills. And so as we think about how we get talent and how we build these digital processes, we've got to really reach for deep analytic skills and really embrace the natural curious, and to be able to bring people from different disciplines to be able to really think analytically. The other thing is that, we've got a lot of issues around cross-functional alignment, and the management of value networks is very high to the people that filled out the survey. Now, when we think about the top 3 trends that people are excited about, right, it's about mobile technologies, it's about visibility, it's data visualization, but some of the concepts around Internet of Things, big data, demand sensing are not as high on the list. And so as we think about, the ability to drive this, we've got to really think about, how do we define big data for every company? How do we make sure that we can drive the analysis? And one of the first places to start is with a data definition, because the term big data has been overhyped in the industry, and so the starting place is, what does it mean for you? And in this study, we talk about that it's a large data set that enables companies to sense, analyze, and better respond to market changes. And we defined it as greater than a petabyte of data, and it could involve disparate data sources, structured and unstructured data, sensor data, image data, and other forms. But it typically deals with velocity, variety, and to a lesser extent, scale. Now, if we look at petabytes, we find that, we ask companies how many of them have a database that equals a petabyte. And 6% of the audience had the volume that would be the definition. But these are growing, and as we look at databases, that will continue to grow. But when people ask me where should they actually spend money on big data and analytics, I tell them it's with velocity, Internet of Things, and variety. And this is where we are on ERP and ERP instances. I know there's a lot of work right now around restructuring databases in ERP and columnar store and the ability to get to reporting data from columnar store. But to me, that's not the story. To me, the story is redefining processes, and it's about the opportunity. It's about the big data opportunity. And so when we ask people about the big data opportunity, 52% see it as an opportunity, 7% see it as a risk, 41% don't know. And one of the issues is I think most people are not thinking about this in terms of what it could be versus, what they have today, and really reschooling themselves and thinking about how do they do this differently. Of the people in the survey, 43% have or plan to have a big data initiative, and you can see that, it's growing. But many of the big data initiatives are run by the CIO, not by the line of business. And my challenge is, I think the natural place for this work is in the Supply Chain Center of Excellence, really some business research funding, which is hard for us to get in today's date when 2015 is a time of belt-tightening. But we see 9% of leaders really considering cognitive learning, and we see 7% really working on the Internet of Things. So the time is here. We're moving, whether or not, the timing of your movement, needs to be driven by your strategy. But this is not pipe dreams. This is stuff that is starting to form, offers great opportunities. And as we look at where people are looking, they're looking at visualization, managed services, better predictive analytics, semi-structured data with indexing, Hadoop, natural language processing, and some are building user sandboxes. So this is not stuff that's in the future. This is not Jetson. This is, we're getting to it. And when people look at where is the greatest stickiness, they're thinking about production planning. They're thinking about the redefinition of maintenance because, we've set up production planning to assume meantime failure of equipment. Internet of Things allows us to see real-time conditions and redefine maintenance and to be able to pull that up in concurrent planning for production planning. They're thinking about demand planning to be able to be outside in and to mine data pools, use sentiment data and social data along with structured data to redefine demand planning. They're thinking about warehouse management for, directed put away and management of orders. And so it's really the redefinition of these processes. And, people today feel that, supply chain visibility and product traceability are high performing. I would question that product traceability really is high performing. I think product traceability is a major opportunity for this area in terms of confirmation and tracking of where things are coming from. I think product traceability is a large risk for branded companies. But important and lower performing are the Internet of Things, geolocation and mapping, and the convergence of mobile applications with cloud. So much to do. Where do we get started? Well, I think that, with those with the big data initiative, they're really looking in these red areas about the use of unstructured data, the Internet of Things, the use of mapping, and how that ties to visualization and how that ties to existing processes. So I found it very interesting that we have so much talk about big data in the press and so few people doing things, Sean, what do you think is the future of analytics, and how do we train this next generation of analysts to get started? What would you recommend we do?
So the future of analytics, Laura, I think is really the bidirectional integration of continuous streaming analytics with planning or big data at rest analytics. The ability to ensure that those two types of methodologies work fluidly and seamlessly with each other will be extremely valuable. For example, you talked about production planning earlier, and you gave the example of what's my mean time between failure for specific components, and I want to build my maintenance plan around that particular constraint. If that constraint was being continuously updated based on not only real-time condition monitoring of equipment, but also of predicted failures of that particular equipment, it gives you the ability to continuously optimize what your production plan is going to be. And when you layer in your demand plan as well as what your real-time demand is, it gives you a holistic view of what has to happen now and how what I'm doing now is going to impact me in the future. And that I find to be really exciting. From a training, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sean, but how do we get people to rewire their brains?
Yeah, from a training perspective, that's a little more difficult because, to your point, it is rewiring your brains. And it's understanding a new method for not only making decisions, but obtaining data to support decisions that have to be made. And the reason for that is, as has previously been discussed on this webinar by all of the panelists, analytical engines are going to be using huge sets of complex rules to make decisions in real time. And at some point, a person is going to be interjected. And that person is going to have the ability to understand what information I need to be served up to me to make a very good and accurate decision. And the ability to understand that I'm actually planning, I'm actually training people to plan on how to handle exceptions rather than handling exceptions in arrears will be quite difficult to understand because it's going to change the thought process around setting up something as simple as a dashboard. Rather than having a red, yellow, green light dashboard and you go to that dashboard to see, well, you know, what color is my light and what action do I have to take, that dashboard will now be set up to reinforce a decision. And the person that's responsible for the creation of that, it really has to be extraordinarily forward-thinking, and that's a fundamental change to a thought process that sounds simple, but will be really difficult to train with today's workforce and the future talent that's currently being developed.
Steve, what are your thoughts? You know, where should we go, and how do we train that new generation of thinker? How do we rewire brains?
You know, Sean just gave a great overview, and I completely agree with him on the notion of if you're going to be able to do the types of concurrent optimizations that he described, the machine will be doing most of the analytic, and the human will be looking at a decisioning system, the output of a decisioning system where they're looking at really the exception of the exceptions, right? The system would have adjusted already for most of those actions, and now the human planner or the human worker is using the output of that, the insight, to create value. So to educate folks differently, I think that, you know, from my conversations with people at leading CPG firms, there seems to be the business schools and the IT schools, the computer science programs and the supply chain programs are not turning out folks that have a broad enough array of analytic skills. So one way of creating value is to try to train the employees to think about things in a more scientific method and look at it in an interdisciplinary way that you can be different and innovative in your thinking, but also think about, instead of I'm doing the analysis, and 80% of my time is spent doing fundamental analysis, now we're going to be thinking about how do we apply that analysis or the insight from that analysis to further advance the business goals. And that is going to be a different mindset of the individuals, and I think it requires training in a scientific method, and having folks think about things less in silos and more interdisciplinary cross-enterprise, and the application of the insight now to the business problem. So if I have a production plan and I need to make it, and I need to adjust my production schedule on my line, what is the impact of that, rather than spending all my time calculating what the analysis should be. And I think that I'm actually positive. I think you will be able to get a interested, enthusiastic part of the employee base to want to become a next generation knowledge worker. And that's at least been what our early experience has been. There's been an eager embrace of that technology and the ability to utilize an insight for a strategic end, rather than spend most of your time doing fundamental analysis.
I find, though, that will happen better when we have a naturally curious leader. I was talking to a company the other day who was doing some great work on Internet of Things, and that was because they had an enlightened leader who was pushing the envelope. And I think that the more we can build those enlightened leaders, the better. I think that's one of the issues. What do you think, Steve?
I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that, it's funny. Our firm is a barometer of where larger firms are not. So, meaning if we have found that the companies that are adopting cognitive learning also happen to be the leaders in their categories. So, and the leaders in those categories seem to have enlightened leaders. So that non-scientific correlation, Laura, between the subset of the companies that are adopting early technologies like cognitive learning are also the companies that happen to be the category leaders, and they are looking to use analytics and insights today the way they use manufacturing distribution advantage in the last century to create value. Here, they want to use analytics and insights. As a matter of fact, one CEO, the CEO of Hershey, famously stated that Hershey's is an analytics and insights firm that happens to sell confectionery products. I mean, that's a bold statement to say that our core is knowing so intimately what we do and how we apply our product to the marketplace that's our core competency. And so I do agree with you. But the other part that I think is very important that you mentioned earlier was the intellectual curiosity of the workforce. So I think that as we seek to restaff portions of our companies, we really do want to look for folks that have training in the scientific methods and folks who are intellectually curious. And I think that that'll be a winning combination.
Yeah, and I remember at the conference that we did last year's Global Summit, I remember the leader from Intel talking about its big data work and the basic use of co-op students, and the fact that he's making job offers 2 and 3 years before they actually matriculate, because he wants to get the brightest, the most curious, and those engineering skills. So I think it requires us reaching in and helping universities. Esther, how about your thought? How do we train this next generation of analysts, and where do people get started in your mind?
Oh, well, I agree totally with Steve in particular, and my thought and what we see on the market is that advanced analytics technologies, in particular based on machine learning technologies, are, let me say, democratizing. So domain experts such as supply chain analysts are going very quickly to be enabled, and already are in few companies are going to be enabled to use these advanced tools directly without needing intermediation from data scientists. So I think that analysts should learn how to focus on business problems and enable the creation of business applications instead of technical details which are actually irrelevant to the business results. So this is my view, to stay very focused on business and to be able to choose even new technologies which are available now, able to easy and make very, very quick and straightforward the connection to business applications and results.
Thank you, Esther. Okay, Dave, what do you think? You know, non-relational is very new. You know, how do companies get started and how do we train this next generation of analysts to rethink problems?
Well, Laura, our leadership identified this as a key issue for us. And so what we did is we created Cloudera University, which actually offers the broad range of these courses with learning paths for developers, administrators, analysts, and data scientists. So to date, we have over 100,000 people that have used our free online training materials. Over 30,000 have been trained through Cloudera University, over 10,000 certified. And I'm really proud of this part. We have over 57 academic partnerships with universities where we donate our curricula into the university, and they're using that to teach the next generation of developers, admins, analysts, and data scientists. So I think we've really embraced that.
And what has been the response? I mean, as people come out, you know, I often will find they'll learn the technology, but they get kind of stuck about how to apply it because the paradigms are so fixed, right? We're so used to stuffing structured data into relational databases. I mean, how do we change the paradigm out of the training?
Well, it comes out of there in getting your big data strategy, which I think pulls together three key elements: extending, innovating, and empowering. So with the extensions of this, you're looking at taking data and analytics that it really encompasses all types of this data, all the types of processing that's available, and opening that up to the user and creating that open culture around that, and then innovating on that data in a way that you're unencumbered by the type of form. So remove those physical barriers that typically constrain this data together within those silos, and creating this culture of empowerment by moving that active analysis and modeling directly into the hands of those that need it most. And so as you create this within the company, you find that you'll have that the people who were building those Excel spreadsheets because they couldn't do it in any other way now actually have a framework to move the business forward.
You know, but they're scared and they've been rewarded for running Excel spreadsheets, right? You know, I go into a lot of organizations, you know, and the dirty little secret is we spend millions on ERP and APS, and most companies are held together with spreadsheets. You know, how do we break that?
I think it's two tracks to it, literally, on this. One, it's creating a technology enablement around this and putting together that framework. And obviously, I'm going to cite, you know, the Enterprise Data Hub as being a key piece of that, but within your organization, creating that technology enablement. And the second is to foster that business culture around it, get to that point where experimentation is not penalized. And the reason it's not going to be penalized is because you've actually taken the pressure off of this, because it used to be, you know, 9 months of ramping this thing up to test a hypothesis. Create that open and agile framework where you can test and learn very quickly on this data, fail fast, and encourage your people to test, learn, and fail fast, because out of that will come some amazing successes. Yeah,
I'm now going to do a rapid fire round and ask each of you what one piece of advice you have for the audience. And let me give you my piece of advice. I was doing an interview with CIO Magazine the other day, and I said one of the hindrances I think we have of analytics is we have a forced ROI. And if I look at the companies that are doing the greatest work with analytics, they fund the ability to test and learn, and they don't force the projects into a fixed return on investment. It's a different mindset. They're testing and learning, and they're allowing innovation funding. Sean, quick round. What one piece of advice do you have?
My one piece of advice is to start small and think big. Have a discrete defined project that you want to begin with, and ensure that that supports a much larger vision. And to reiterate what Dave said, win fast, but ensure that you lose faster with your projects, and don't be afraid to pick yourself back up and move on from any potential losses or roadblocks that you hit upon the way.
Okay, great. Steve, what one piece of advice do you have?
I think creating a culture of innovation and that allows you to do rapid prototyping of new solutions in a crawl, walk, run type of an approach, de-risks projects and allows people to build success and to build business cases and adaptive business cases as they go through the crawl, walk, run stage of rapid ideation and innovation at their company.
Great. Esther, what one piece of advice?
I would quote Albert Einstein. He said that we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created the problems. So I would say try to solve your problems using new technologies and new approaches, which are clearly focused to the business side of the problem. So, and just do it. Start with a small pilot project, because the best way to learn is by doing.
Right. Dave, what one piece of advice?
All right, so I see you're Einstein. I raise you 1 Newton on this.
Okay.
And remember Newton's first law, which is an object that's at rest will tend to stay at rest unless an external force acts upon it. So find an interesting problem, pose a hypothesis that can be proved or disproved through data, and to quote Esther, just do it. It's far easier than you think to get started.
Right. So my challenge to people is next year when I do this tracking survey, I want to see far more people testing new technologies, people that have supply chain centers of excellence. I'd love to see them consider innovation funding and allow the teams to ideate around not what they have today, but what could be possible in the future. I'd love to see them embrace the natural curious. I actually had an Internet of Things webinar with Costa Coffee where they postulated that 30-year-olds have a great opportunity to see the future and, you know, to see what could be. So as we count down for our global summit, where we're going to be taking these kinds of concepts and we're going to ideate around how new forms of analytics and big data can lend ourselves to new business models and new business opportunities, we want to be sure that everybody marks their calendar for September 9th and 10th to join us at the Global Supply Chain Insights Summit, and it'll be held in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have some great speakers that we've lined up, really 3 themes, looking at the continuation of the supply chains to admire, to understand which supply chain companies are making the greatest progress. We'll then focus on new business models and opportunities, and then talk about talent and cultural awareness, and then we'll actually be doing some simulation exercises to help people to play a game. It's our reinvention of the beer game to really look at the differences between inside out and outside in processes. We hope to see everyone there. And again, you know, if you need more reading, my book, Metrics That Matter, published in December 2014. I would love your feedback on that. And join us in our countdown for the webinar. You can follow our work on SCI Webinar. You can see us on Twitter, and we will be posting these slides on SlideShare. And if you have a question, just drop us a line. This is Laura Ciceri. We hope that we can fuel new thoughts and innovation for supply chain visionaries to be able to capture leading edge opportunities. I want to thank my panelists today. I think each of them is a thought leader in their own right, and I think that it is the combination of new technologies to be able to fuel new innovation and new processes. So Sean, Steve, Esther, and Dave, thank you very much, and we will make your contact information available. If people have a question, they can reach out to you directly. Thank you very much. This is Laura Ciceri, Supply Chain Insights. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.